In this they did not at first succeed, but, sailing along the shore a little farther, they reached a cozy bay, where they weighed anchor. They named it Street Helena Bay, and Vasco da Gama was sure that they were not far from the Cape of Good Hope. They were not to leave Street Helena, however, without having some stirring adventures with the dusky natives of that country. Vasco da Gama went on shore with his astrolabe in order to take the altitude of the sun. Meanwhile a number of his men also landed, some to take in water for the ships, and others to stroll about to see what they could find. While the captain was busy with his instruments, some of his men came hurriedly running to him, and exclaimed, that, as they were ascending a woody hillock nearby, they had espied two naked negroes a little distance off, stooping down in the shrubbery as if gathering something. Now, nothing could please Vasco da Gama better than to hear this, for he was not only curious to see what kind of people lived in Africa, but he was anxious to find somebody who could tell him how near he might be to the Cape. "Go," he said, "and surround them as quietly as possible, and seize and bring them to me." 5 or 6 men hastened to obey. They crept along, hidden among the brush, until they had got very near the negroes, who, all unconscious of their danger, went on busily with their work. The men now saw that they were gathering honey. They rushed upon them, but only succeeded in capturing one. The other was too nimble, and, in a great fright, ran away. The sailors returned to Vasco in triumph with their captive, who stared and trembled, and seemed overcome with mingled terror and amazement. Vasco tried to communicate with him by signs, but he only rolled his eyes, and showed his white teeth, in an agony of fright. Then a Negro boy who happened to be on one of the ships was sent for, and Vasco told him to take the native aside, and to try to get him to eat, and see if he could talk with him. Presently the native became reassured by the food, and by seeing one of his own color, and now began to make a number of signs and motions with great rapidity, grinning from ear to ear. Vasco dressed him up in gay clothes, gave him some little bells, crystal beads, and a red nightcap, which made him dance with delight, and made signs to him to go and get some of his companions, promising that, when he returned, he should have some more presents. The native scampered away, and, true to his word, he soon brought back 10 or 12 men as woolly and black as himself. These men were small in stature, and as ugly in their features as they could possibly be. They wore the skins of beasts loosely about their bodies, and a queer wooden arrangement about their middle, while for arms they carried oak staves which had been ardent in the fire, upon the end of which horns had been fixed for points. Vasco was amused to observe, that, when they spoke, they made sounds as if they were sighing. The negroes eagerly took the presents that were offered them, but seemed to care little for gold or silver articles, or for spices. They were much better pleased with toys, tin rings, counters, and beads. But little information could be got from them, however, and so they were sent away. The next day they returned to the bay, bringing 40 or 50 other negroes with them, and these grew so sociable and familiar, that Veloso, one of Vasco da Gama's men, begged to be permitted to go with them to their village, which by signs they described as being behind a high hill not far off. Now, this Veloso had a way of bragging a great deal of what he could do, and his comrades were not sorry to see his courage put to the test. Off he started with his new friends, the others cheering him as he went. Vasco da Gama returned on board the San Rafael, while Coelho remained on shore to look after the crews while they cut some wood, and Paulo da Gama, who did not like to be idle, took some men in 2 of the boats, and, provided with fish spears and harpoons, went out into the bay to catch some fish. This sport nearly cost Paulo his life. The harpoons had been tied by ropes to the bows of the boats, and, the men having harpooned a small whale, he whirled about savagely, and came near upsetting the boat in which Paulo was. Happily the water was very shallow, and the rope long, so that the monster was with some difficulty taken. It was nearly sunset, and the captains and men had already taken the boats to return to the ships for the night, when they heard a loud cry from one of the neighboring hills. Turning in that direction, they saw poor Veloso running with all his might towards them. One of the boats was ordered to return at once to the shore, and take him in, but the sailors, who were not sorry to see the boastful Veloso frightened out of his wits, rowed very slowly, so as to prolong his agony. The boat touched the shore, and Veloso was on the point of springing in, when a party of Negroes rushed out of an ambush where they had concealed themselves, and 2 of them caught hold of him, and tried to drag him away. A struggle ensued, in which the 2 Negroes were severely wounded with spears. This only enraged the others, who began to hurl showers of arrows and stones at the boat. The other boats hurried up to take part in the fray, and some of the Portuguese jumped on shore. Vasco da Gama, eager to punish the savages for their perfidy, was standing up in his boat, and giving orders to his men, when an arrow sunk its point in his leg. The captain, however, insisted on remaining, and commanded some of his crossbowmen to pour a volley into the Negroes, which they did with good effect.